Superman.
Marriage is the best. Hey, welcome back to Marriage is the Best. We're glad that you have chosen to join us today. Today we're going to be talking about all sorts of things that we may or may not find in my mind. Because I had a bunch of different thoughts all throughout the week, whether it be in session thoughts like, oh man, that would be a good topic. I should cover something like that. Or just kind of life stuff, personal marriage stuff, finances, crazy, stressful seasons of life, transitions, lots and lots of things kind of pass through the old noggin on our way to Sunday. Sunday night is usually when I'm recording because time is not a thing in my world. And so basically I do this on Sunday nights. Pretty much every Sunday, I have to remind Becca, which is not something I do very often. Like, hey, or just remember, I gotta do a pod tonight. I gotta record a podcast. And most of the time, it's in a moment when I think that she's probably not thinking, oh yeah, Peter has this thing going on that he's got to do, and here he is reminding me of that thing. So I did that twice tonight. Once, a few hours ago, just to let her know, like, hey, we're not going to be able to do our normal kind of hanging outy stuff. I got to do the pod. And then once just 10 minutes ago, and I asked her, hey, do you want to join me? Is that something that you would be up for tonight? Because we could talk about year 5, or, we could talk about miscarriages. We could talk about conflict. We could talk about literally anything, and it would be fun. But instead of responding with words, she used the universal sign in the form of Toothless's growl from How to Train Your Dragon. We recently went and saw How to Train Your Dragon, literally tonight, and it was a blast. It was the live action one, and they did a phenomenal job. The voices matched, the story matched note for note, beat for beat. That was pretty cool. And the dragons were epic. They were super, super cool. They did a great job with the design of the dragons and all that good stuff. So, yeah. So she used Toothless's growl to let me know she wasn't up for podcasting tonight. One day I probably will actually incorporate more sounds, but at this point in time, I'm just not that interested in them. So yeah, movies. We've actually gotten to see a few different movies just recently. And one thing that I had been thinking about quite a bit this last week was marriage in media. Well, marriage, yes, but also just relationships in general in media. And I think that one thing that is shaping the way that our culture looks at marriage and looks at dating and relationships in general, they are the things that we're seeing in films. So Becca and I, just last week, we got to go on our little date, thanks to mi madre. Thank you so much. And we had a really nice time. We went out, we had a little dinner, we went to the movies, and it was kind of a perfect little dinner and a show date night. We went and saw Superman and genuinely had a really nice time. I very much enjoyed this kind of take on Superman. James Gunn, the director, does an incredible job of storytelling and finding beats and notes throughout the story to kind of build up the characters and whatnot, right, as a director should. But he did a good job. He did a good job kind of building up this Superman as a very kind of naive, kind of innocent and naive kind of a guy. Very much trying to just do what's right and chance the consequences, and still trying to figure out how to balance some of his responsibilities with the power that he has. And in the movie, right off the bat, we kind of see him. Oh, you know what? Spoiler alert. Here we go. I caught myself. So before you continue to listen, we are going to talk a little bit about things that happened in the movie. And I don't think there'll be any crazy spoilers unless I get a little crazy in my storytelling. But there are spoilers into the future. So if you haven't seen Superman and you don't want to know anything before going into the movie, definitely do not listen to the rest of the show. Thanks for coming anyway. But Superman is presented in a weekend. That was your spoiler. Like if you don't want to hear the rest, you gotta stop here. Okay. He's presented in this weakened state, right? And he kind of crashes in Antarctica, and that's where the sanctum is, wherever his little hideout is. And he's all weak because he just, we later find out that he lost a battle. And so we see him weakened right off the bat, and we see him kind of recharge and get back in the fight. And he's just, I gotta go basically save these people, because the threat is not taken care of, and he has this responsibility to use his power to protect the people that were in danger in Metropolis. So he goes back and he starts fighting, and kind of gets a little roughed up, and then the story kind of moves on, and we find out more about the plot. So I won't give you too many details about the plot thereafter. But one thing that we note is the next day or sometime later, he goes to work, and we find out, he's got his glasses on. And so Clark Kent goes to work, and he's going in, and obviously Lois Lane is there. And if you know anything about Superman, you probably know that Superman and Lois Lane are a thing. And so in this movie in particular, it was interesting for Becca and I to kind of watch how they developed the relationship between Lois and Clark, which could very easily be confused for Lewis and Clark, who... That's a bad joke. We should just take that out. Take it out in post. Okay. So Lois and Clark. And because the movies and the media that we consume has an impact on the way that we think about relationships, I think that this relationship specifically in this film is an interesting case study. When they first interact, they are coworkers, and Lois is poking fun, not overly amicably, but just poking fun at Clark for always getting these, interviews with Superman. And we don't really know what their relationship status looks like yet. At least I didn't notice anything. They may have done something in text right at the beginning, but I missed some of the texts. And so I'm not sure if they identified kind of where the relationship was at. But we know Lois, we know Superman, we know Lois, we know that is a thing. And so they have this kind of interaction at work where she's like, wow, yeah, you get all these blah, blah, blah interviews with Superman. How do you do it? And he's like, yep, that's me. I do that. So they're done at work, and the scene cuts. And the first scene that we see of them, the very next scene that we see of them is Lois is coming home into her apartment, and she's opening the door, and she's walking in, and she hears somebody in the apartment, and so she grabs a bat and is, going to defend herself from someone who's in her apartment, which is weird. And it turns out to be Clark, and he's making breakfast. And a very, very small little side comment is made about them having been in a relationship for 3 months. So there we go. We've got some details on how long the relationship has been. It's a 3-month It's been 3 months since they started dating. We don't really know how long he's worked at the Daily Planet, nor do we know, the friendship story before this. So all we know is they see each other at work, they're coworkery, and throw some coworker communication in there, and now they're dating. And then they share this big kiss. It's like, we saw each other at work. We've been dating for 3 months. He's in my apartment making me breakfast for dinner for our 3-month. And then we're having this intimate moment of kissing. And I would say that kissing someone is quite an intimate thing to do. We don't just go around kissing all sorts of different kinds of people. And so this kind of bothered me, that in the context of this relationship, why does he have a key or go through the windows of her apartment after they've been dating for 3 months? That seems a little weird, a little awkward. Either he didn't understand that was wrong, or a little shocking, or this has happened maybe before. But if it had happened before, would she really assume that it was a bad guy and grab the bat? I'm not so sure. And then we've got this kiss, and it's really quite an intimate kiss. It's not like a pecking kiss. It's a longer kind of big embrace and kiss in the kitchen. And then they proceed to have a awkward conversation about Lois asking for an interview for a Superman, and then Clark giving her that interview. And then they're fighting about politics and a country that had recently attacked another country, and how Superman had stepped into that. And so she's kind of playing hard reporter, hardened reporter, trying to get to the bottom of what Superman was thinking when he stepped into this big geopolitical. And they get into this kind of heated back and forth where Clark is trying to justify the decision that he made of kind of entering, like inserting himself into the geopolitics of the region. And kind of his defense is like, people were going to die. And so Superman had to step in. I had to step in because people were going to die. And that's not necessarily good enough for Lois, because it's created all of these issues for Superman, and for, that she's questioning that it was the right thing to do, to use his power to step into something that, was in a far off land where Metropolis is in the United States. And is Metropolis in the United States? I think it is. Anyways, it's not in the countries that he, interceded for. And so Lois has an issue with that. But in this scene, we see their relationship really tense, at least Lois's relationship with Superman. And there's frustration, and there's this conflict aura. And basically, Superman gets to the end of this fight and then leaves, because it's overwhelming for him. You can tell that he's kind of getting overwhelmed by the questions and the doubt that Lois is kind of expressing in their heated conversation. So Superman leaves. And as he leaves, Lois makes this comment about either like not knowing if this is right, not really knowing, something to the effect of, I knew this was going to happen. So there's this tension in the relationship, and then he leaves, runs out of there, kind of this fight, flight response. And he has to leave because he can't really handle being questioned about his kind of activities, and Lois kind of playing that role with Superman of the hardened reporter. I don't even know if hardened is a good word for that. There's probably a better word out there. So this scene bothered me immediately. I finished watching it and I just thought to myself, well, what just happened, right? Why is he in her apartment if they've known each other for 3 months, unannounced and unwelcomed? Why are they sharing this big intimate kiss in her apartment after 3 months of dating. And the only contexts that we have seen these people in is kind of these stale, kind of robotic coworker, and then surprised girlfriend. So as he's making breakfast for dinner, he says, "Yeah, I'm making you breakfast for dinner. I know that you really like that." And she says, "No, Clark, you like breakfast for dinner. I like breakfast for breakfast." Something to that effect. And so what we get from this is basically that they don't know each other all that well. They've been only dating for a short while. Their conflict and conflict communication resolution system is not great, which makes a lot of sense after 3 months. Clark is incredibly innocent and kind of naive in some of this, and in the innocence and naivete, he is really struggling to work through confrontation when it comes to his decision-making as Superman. We also learned that Lois has some self-doubt in herself. We also learned that Lois has some self-doubt in the areas of relationship based on her comments. So here's the thing that bothers me. So what we get to see is a relationship that is very young and not super developed. And in these kind of tense moments, so the good things about this scene is that it shows a level of conflict and struggle that is normal in relationships. Difficult conversations do sound like this. And you can kind of tell that each of them is coming at the conversation from a genuine point of view, and they're both genuinely looking to kind of represent where they're coming from, right? Like represent their perspective. And that's great. Like a lot of conversations actually should kind of look something like that. And because of the ridiculously vast differences between men and women, and the way that we see the world and the way that we kind of are wired and the way that we work and respond and the way that conflict affects us and moves through us, you could see this kind of conversation being the kind of conversation that they show us here is very genuine. And I actually appreciated that part of it. Clark leaves, and I don't actually have a huge issue with that. I don't really mind that he got so overwhelmed that he just needed to step away. Stepping away after a heated discussion and then being able to come back and repair is a healthy relationship technique. And I think that most of us should probably practice this at some point in our lives. We're going to get to a place where continuing on in the conflict is not beneficial. And you just need to step away. At some point, our brains just kind of shut down. The thinking part of our brains are basically off. We're only emotional, and continuing to engage at that point is kind of foolish. It's just not wise. And so stepping away, walking away, coming back and re-engaging is a really good, it's a really good technique, especially if you have like a system for re-engagement, right? So you don't want to leave that kind of conversation and then never touch it again, because what that tends to do is it tends to create kind of a pressurized buildup of conflict in the relationship. I think the thing that bothered me most in this scene is that we're showing choices that were made to convey intimacy early on in a relationship. Obviously, if Clark is breaking into this apartment to cook breakfast for dinner for Lois, because he is smitten with her, and that's akin to other crazy things that we as men do when we're smitten with our spouses or girlfriends at this point. And I can definitely think back to things that I did that were a little bit crazy when it came to Becca. I thought she was the bee's knees, and I was super infatuated with her and attracted to her. And so I did do some crazy things. So that's fine. I might be alone on this, But the kissing in this initial scene really bothered me. It bothered me because it was such an intimate moment physically that it didn't really have any basis or grounding in the relationship that they've built so far. It seems ill-timed. And the scene, I think, would have been much more effective without this big, intimate kiss. What we know about Clark up to this point is that he is vulnerable, physically vulnerable, that he is, that the bad guy in the film is working to undermine him and is doing a pretty good job, that Lois and Clark are working together and they've been dating for 3 months, and that it's not going particularly well. We also know that Superman is kind of naive and innocent in the way that he thinks about the world and difficult things. And yet, they convey this physically intimate act that doesn't seem naive or innocent. It seems very passionate and intimate and charged. And so based on what we know of Superman at this point in time and the relationship that he has with Lois, it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to have them engaged in that level of intimate touch at this stage of their relationship. If you look previously at previous Supermans, Becca and I were talking about how previously, Superman was extremely innocent and, wouldn't dare, very honorable, overly maybe honorable in the way that he would treat Lois or women. And now I'm sure that there are lots of iterations where that may not be the case, but we've already established this character in this world as kind of having some of those old school tendencies. And so that is why I think that the scene would have been much more effective and would have held a lot more weight had they held off on any sort of physical intimate touch. It would also have made the fight a little bit more congruent. The comment that Lois makes about, not being ready or knowing that it wouldn't work, a little bit more congruent with what's going on in the relationship. I think it sends a little bit of a mixed signal where we're making out in the kitchen and it's okay that he broke into my apartment after 3 months of dating, and we really don't see eye to eye and are having this deep conflict, and I knew it would never work. If those things are true, then why are we making the choice to be so physically intimate? Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking of one word. It starts with a P and rhymes with prune, and it's prude. That's not a good transition. Let's pick a different one. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, what a prude. And you might be right. I might just be a prude. But I think that there's something to be said about making relational choices in films and media, showing examples of relationships that are healthy and that are maybe in process. They don't have to be perfect, but that they're at least congruent, right? The touch is congruent with the relationship, because what it does is it's good. All I'm really asking, all it would do really, in my opinion, is it would just add to the storytelling. At this point in time, they've been dating for 3 months. There's all this weirdness around it, all of these things going on, and yet we have to throw in these big kissing moments. I don't think that that's helpful for young people. I don't think that that's helpful for relationship culture generally, who, people are currently kind of falling into the sleep around mentality. And it almost is a representation of not necessarily sleeping around, but incongruent intimacy in relationships. And I think that that really bothered me because I see on my end how destructive that can be. Not to say that Becca and I haven't had our own story about incongruency in the physical relationship. The thing with that, though, is that it took us years to overcome the incongruence. By that, I mean the level of intimate touch doesn't match the level of the emotional commitment, the knowledge, the trust, and the reliance on the relationship. When you have that as your foundation, a great knowledge, a great trust system, like you really trust this person, they're proven they're reliable, and you're committed to them, then when you're touching, there's a congruence with the foundation of the relationship that you've built. When you are touching someone intimately and you don't know them that well, right? Like let's say that you've dated for 3 months. It's not that helpful to be touching on that level when your knowledge system is this low. If you don't trust someone, right? Obviously, breaking into someone's apartment and making them breakfast for dinner when they don't even like breakfast for dinner all that much isn't necessarily a good representation of how trustworthy this person is. So if the trust system, the knowledge system isn't there, the trust system isn't there, okay, he's proven himself that he is not reliable. He made this huge error in Lois's eyes at this time in trying to jump into the geopolitics of the day. And so there's a question about his reliability and his trust in that. You know, you have this great amount of power, Clark, and I don't necessarily see you using it in the way that would be, you know, in a way that would convey wisdom, right? That you are using this wisely. And there's not really a huge commitment. She literally kind of like throws it out there at the end of the conversation, like, all right, I knew this wasn't going to work, you know, after their mock interview. And so they don't have anything. They don't have a foundation. They don't have a foundation of knowledge. They don't have a foundation of trust. They're not reliable. They're not committed, right? We're going to see this through. We're going to work this through. We're going to chew on it, but we're still committed to one another, right? That's not going on. And so all of those things are undermined with all of the information that we have in this scene. And yet there's this intimate physical connection that they've created, which creates a large level of incongruence in the relationship. So let's fast forward. Okay. So the movie goes on and there's fighting and action and it's incredible. Guy Gardner is awesome. That's the Green Lantern. Hawk Girl is really cool and louder than cool maybe. And Mr. Terrific, who became one of my favorite characters in this movie, is stoic and absurd and wonderful. And so all of the meta-humans that are a part of this world are really, I don't know, kind of like charming in their own ways, mostly kind of like standoffish ways, but you know, that's charming sometimes. And the whole story, Lex is incredible. I was really worried about Lex's character because I guess I just didn't know that this guy was a phenomenal actor who had ridiculous chops. Like, oh my word, he was incredible. I came in thinking I was going to like him the least, and I ended up, he probably gave the best performance of the film. So way to go, Lex. You did a good job, and I was very impressed. So all of these things are happening, more geopolitics, more undermining of the superhero, of the Superman. And we get this another scene where Superman is now in his apartment, not her apartment. And Lois is there. She just shows up. She's randomly hanging out in her apartment. So why do the people who don't have a relational base have each other's apartment keys? That probably, when the trust system and the knowledge system and the commitment and the reliance system aren't there, why are we sharing this? That doesn't seem right. Why is that a good idea? I don't know. Maybe I'm old school, but that just doesn't seem right. So she's in his apartment and he's there, and there's a cool like fight going on in the background because it's like this massive penthouse apartment. And you can see these like huge windows, and they're looking on at the city, and there's a battle going on outside, and then they're having this conversation inside. They had like a serious discussion, and then he leaves again. But essentially, it gets to the point where Clark is saying, like, I've got to leave again because I have these like big responsibility things to go do. And Lois gives him a hug, and it was really it was a nice moment because it didn't feel sexual at all. What it felt like was supportive, like a supportive connection. But also, there's this moment at the end where it feels like what she is saying is that she is kind of feeling like maybe this isn't going to work between them. And she even reiterates this later on in the movie where she tells the Justice Gang that she was actually thinking about breaking up with Superman, which reiterates my point that the first scene, I really struggled with that first scene. Because you can tell that this is part of the dynamic, and yet the intimacy, the touch part of the relationship is blown out of proportion for characters that it doesn't make any sense for. So then, so that's fine. It's like they're going to break up, and then she ends up going on this crazy ride with Mr. Terrific, one of the terrific characters in the show. And so she ends up finding Superman, and it's a really cool scene. They're in this. Anyways, it's great. You should definitely go see it because it really is it's really well done. But at the end of the day, Lois and Clark run away from the craziness of the media and all of these things into this mall, which is completely empty, it seems like. And they share this flying make-outy kiss at the very end. And then she looks up at him and she says, "I love you too." And everything in me just cringed. First of all, I didn't believe her when she said that. In the apartment, at some point before this moment, Clark had stated that he was in love with Lois after 3 months, which, jumping the gun for some, a little late for others, who knows? But that's what he says. And so she is responding to that in this moment, and it feels completely disingenuous. She went on a crazy ride to get to this next level or different point, right? Because he proved now more trustworthy, more reliable. He did a good job beating up the bad guys and winning the day. And so maybe there is some more trust and some reliability that there's proven here. And maybe we did learn a little bit about each other along the way. And they're sharing this like huge buildup of a kiss. And she looks up and she says, "I love you." So this felt super incongruent again. And it also felt really weird with the level of an intimate kiss that we've already seen between the two. Now, if a different choice had been made, right, if they shared a really sweet, small kiss while flying at the end of this film, and they had not kissed super intimately in her apartment earlier on, I actually think I would have been like, okay, that was tasteful, because it made sense. Like, maybe they shared their first kiss after winning the day, after knowing each other for 3 months, after their relationship was tested. And now they're sharing, this intimate moment, and it's sweet and it's nice and it's built on something, right? Because they showed us throughout the film that there was trials and testing and forging in the relationship and doubt, right? And they were overcoming all of these things. And so now we're going to show you that because of how they moved through this, right? Because of their increased knowledge, their increased trust, their increased reliance and commitment to one another, now their level of touch is growing, right? Because because that's how healthy relationships grow in this area. And yet we just don't get any of that, right? And it's really not off-putting, but it isn't congruent at all with where their relationship is at. And it just makes the whole idea that she is now confessing her love for him tacky and unbelievable. I didn't believe her that she loved him. It was difficult to believe. Maybe, and it didn't fit the relationship. It was difficult to believe, and it didn't fit the relationship. And I think it was because of the way that their relational story was framed throughout the entire film, and not just because of this moment or the actress even, right? Like I think that she did a fine job. Both Superman and Lois did a fine job. How we convey relationships in our culture is going to shape the hearts and the minds of the people in the culture, especially the young people who are seeing this and are most impressionable. And so sending the message, the ideas that the touch or physical intimacy system is something that can be entered into throughout all stages and early stages without the work of building trust and knowledge and reliability and commitment into the relationship is a really dangerous message for relationships. It's a really dangerous message for the future, like the marital future, or, of the culture, where people have strong, healthy relationships because they've done the work to build the foundation. Showing a physical system of connecting with one another that is incongruent with how healthy relationships tend to grow. And I think it does damage to the understanding of what healthy relationship looks like for young people when you convey relationships like this. Young people have a hard enough time already in our culture, and there is so much media out there that is relationally destructive, whether it be setting them up for failure, whether it be showing them things that are not appropriate for their age stage development, giving them poor examples of how relationships should grow and develop, and kind of glorifying, idealizing a form of relationship that just isn't healthy. And that bothered me. It's something that I noticed. Now, throughout this last week, I did see a couple clients, and I'm sure quite a few of them had seen Superman already. And I happened to make a comment about how I didn't really appreciate the relationship between Superman and Lois. And I had a really interesting conversation with somebody about that. And it was good. It was good. But what struck me was that they didn't see it at all, right? Like, oh, I just watched the movie and I enjoyed it. Well, when there's relationships involved like this, my brain just goes like globs on to all of the things that just feel wrong in the presentation of the relationship. And so I'm sure that if you've seen this, which I hope you have, and I hope that you'll go see it because it's really a wonderful film. I want you should pay attention to some of that, because our ability to convey what is happening in the relationships that our kids are seeing played out in culture, in media, in books, in life, is directly related to their ability to learn about what is healthy and to make successful, healthy choices in the future. Now, all we can do is what we can, we can't do everything to fix that. But if we have insightful conversations about where healthy relationships come from, we will set our kids and the culture up for success as it attempts to build relational foundations for marriages in the future. Thank you so much for sticking with me and listening to my rant about Superman and Lois. I really appreciate it. I think you guys are awesome. Thank you so much for the support and the love and for continuing to listen to us. It's been a lot of fun. If you haven't already, go check out the first 4 years, 1, 2, 3, 4. We just did the 4th year last week. And if you haven't checked it out, please feel free to do so. Feel free to smash could you hit the 5 stars on the thing? Because then other people will find it. And maybe there'll be a firestorm about my opinions on Superman and Lois. They're right, so it wouldn't bother me. But yeah, so feel free to do that. We really appreciate that. We are working on some interviews. We've got a few kind of in the cooking. And so if you like those, feel free to let us know that you're enjoying the interviews. If you like Peter ranting about culture, feel free to let us know. You can comment culture somewhere. I don't know where you do that, but you could try it. If you think of anything that you would like to hear on the pod or different relationships in culture that you would like us to address, feel free to shoot us a message. Let us know what you're thinking, what you're seeing. We can break it down. We can analyze it. We can talk about the efficacy of the relationships that we're finding in the culture. And we hope that this is encouraging to you and that you enjoy our little pod. So, peace out. This is the end. I'm using congruent to define congruent. Get it in post. Here we go.